Did you know? About 20 years ago, Inti, who was mostly known in that time period for developing the Mega Man 0 and ZX titles, among others, did once upon a time develop one Mega Man Battle Network game, albeit it was Mega Man Battle Chip Challenge, which is often considered the worst Battle Network spin-off because of its departure from the action RPG gameplay the mainline series is known for, and its severe lack of player interactivity during its battles. Welp, fast forward to 2024, and Inti is taking a second shot at the card battling RPG genre with their new IP, Card-en-Ciel. It clearly takes inspiration from Battle Network, down to the familiar 6x3 grid and battles, and the dungeon map layouts. Yet, much like Battleship Challenge, the gameplay takes a vastly different approach to the formula. But is it for better or worse this time? To help answer that question, Inti gave me early access to the upcoming Card-en-Ciel demo that consists of a tutorial dungeon and the beginning 2 story dungeons, including the ability to carry over your progress to the full release on October 24th. And with the added replayability by nature of this being a roguelite card game, having about 100 of the 300 cards available to find, and the demo granting access to the many harder difficulty modes for the 2 dungeons, this offers an insightful snapshot into the gameplay loop and how the systems all come together. The rest of you can try the demo for yourself via Steam on September 4th and Nintendo Switch on September 5th, which I would recommend doing, as I will say that the trailers released for this game so far don't do it enough justice. That's why I'm here to hopefully convey to you as much as humanly possible how this game actually works. So here are my demo impressions, and if you are interested in some live gameplay, following this video, I will also be streaming the demo today right here on this YouTube channel. The basic premise is you play as Neon, the gaming chair detective, a hacker who full dives into the virtual worlds of different VR video games to solve crimes that happen within them. The story begins with Neon receiving a mysterious email that leads him to the world of the Rust Tactics game and the sender, Inti, who works for the company behind RT. Neon jacks in, as she is being attacked by mad obstructive data, or mods for short. For anyone who is familiar with Mega Man X Dive, mods are a lot like that game's deep log errors. You have characters from completely different games popping up where they shouldn't be and causing trouble. After the initial rescue then, Neon and Inti agree to work together to solve the mystery of the mod phenomena. Inti will act as your navigator as Neon dives into the dungeons themed after both fictional games created specifically for Card-en-Ciel and even real-life Inti games, such as the Azure Striker Gunvolt, Galgun, and Umbra Claw series being the most prominently featured in this demo. Oh, and I guess Divine Dynamo Flamefrit is now a real game too. The 2 dungeons the demo gives us access to consist of Kizuna Connect, which hilariously is a cheeky Digimon reference, complete with their own version of Omnimon, as well as Love Above the Rooftops, a kinky romance visual novel about a dude that loves big robot girls. Well, these kinds of dating sims are popular in Japan, so what you gonna do? Speaking of Japan, friendly reminder that Inti hails from there, and another reminder, they made Galgun. What I mean is, while I enjoy Neon and how much of a simultaneous gaming nerd and complete loser he is, in a loving way of course, and props to the English actor for doing a great job of capturing his cool yet humorous vibe, on the flip side, it's difficult to look past how unsettling the way that Inti is portrayed. And I don't just mean the jiggle physics, because by golly, from the word go, she lays it on really thick how much she likes Neon.
How do you really feel about me? Well then, that makes me feel a little better. I'd love to hear more about you, personally. I can't get enough of your voice. I want to hear it more. Anything that happens in here will be our little secret.
Okay, that in itself is tolerable, whatever, right? But then you get towards the end of the demo, where the characters start talking about lap pillows, which ends with Inti offering Neon to rest on her lap. Oh, that's a funny throwaway line. Surely she jests and nothing will actually come up. What in the world is this? I just unlocked a lap pillow button? What the heck? They really shouldn't have, but Inti really knows how to commit to the bit. Listen, it's one of those things where Inti knows exactly what audience they're catering towards, and I'm sure those people are going to eat it up. But for everyone else on the outside of that niche, yeah, I better not let my wife catch me playing this. Jeez! Putting that aside, if I can say something positive, it's really cool that this game has a full-on storyline, because most roguelite games put story dead last in their priorities, and they don't really allow you to connect with the characters. This game does do that, however, and although we can't see the full scope of it here in the demo, Inti Creates is generally known for their dramatic and sad stories at the end, so I'm sure there will be a lot of that to come. Okay, moving on to what you're really here for. How does it play? First, a word about the marketing for this game. Especially in the gameplay review trailers for Card-en-Ciel, you'll see that the player is most likely a developer that knows exactly what they are doing. Rapid firing cards off like the game is supposed to be some kind of fast-paced affair. And perhaps that plays into the "this is boring to watch" criticism I've seen towards Card-en-Ciel. Maybe it's because Inti is known as the action game company and they wanted to cater to that audience? Whatever the reason, the footage on display is not exactly a reflection of my experience in reality. To truly appreciate what Card-en-Ciel is doing, we need to look at this within the right frame of mind. If you take away anything from this video, it's that Card-en-Ciel is a turn-based card game in the truest sense. Your board is fashioned after Battle Network, sure, but the rest of the overlaying mechanics is as if they married those Battle Network elements to TCGs like Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, or Hearthstone. You got your mana-like cost points that normally dictate how many cards you can use per turn, but there are countless cards and effects that can help you ignore those costs and extend your combos. So then the cards themselves become your resource, especially when for free you can alternatively use cards to move and dodge out of the enemy's attack range, which naturally makes draw power very powerful. In TCG terms, Card-en-Ciel would indeed be considered fast-paced, similar to modern Yu-Gi-Oh, because the game heavily incentivizes you to OTK as much as possible. And figuring out how cards synergize with each other and chaining together massive combos in a single turn is the key to achieving higher ranking scores. However, in video game terms, yeah, it's very slow paced because I have to take the time to study my hand and the board. I have to plan out my turn multiple moves ahead because there is an almost overwhelming amount of elements to keep track of at once. Do I have enough break cards to stagger my opponent, gain a cost point back, and go for gain this turn by taking advantage of the double damage you get? Will I be able to get my combo off before I'm interrupted by the enemy's attack once their time counter reaches 0? You know, this one card is pretty powerful, but it's the only one in my hand that moves me out of harm's way. Do I need to waste it on movement, or do I have another way to avoid damage? What's the optimal order I should be playing my cards to get the most value out of my turn? Looking from afar, the cards look simple. Red cards are the damaging attacks, blue cards deal break damage, which helps you stagger the enemy and reduce their attack power. Green cards are your support spells, and you also get the yellow action cards that give you a chance to counterattack if used when the enemy's time counter is at 1. But then, the deeper you go, each dungeon's unique card pool introduces a new archetype of card effects that synergize in different ways and change the way that you approach battles and deck building. Want to raise your stats with the amp effects that provide buffs when you use the card for movement? How about building around the setup cards that gain an additional powerful effect when you have exactly 5 cards in your hand? There's a ton more to experiment with too, even within the demo, such as forging extra cards, banishing cards from play in exchange for a positive effect. Sound familiar, Yu-Gi-Oh players? Summoning support objects, converting the Gunvolt series adepts into their glaive forms, and more. Not to mention, there are special energy points you accumulate that can be used to temporarily upgrade a card with additional damage and or a more powerful effect. The blue notes are free, but if you use the single red note, the card gets fractured and becomes a dead card in your hand should you draw it again in future battles. Oh, and harkening back to the Gunvolt series, we got recruitable muses that activate their song during battle after fulfilling their condition, providing you with a buff for the remainder of battle that usually aligns with those archetype of effect cards I mentioned. Getting multiple muses out at once can enable crazy strings of combos and make you feel unstoppable. Yup, lots of possibilities and micro decisions to consider if you want to be efficient and go for the best rank. It may be slow, but the game doesn't punish you at all for taking the time to think things through. The timer only ticks when you make a move. You actually dump your entire hand and get a fresh one when you pass your turn, so there is no reason not to use every card you can and try to get the maximum value out of them. Unless you strategically decide to hold off staggering your opponent until the next turn since their break meter doesn't replenish. That's my piece of advice when approaching the battles in this game. Take a deep breath, take it slow, and take note of the situation at all times because, no joke, one wrong move can potentially screw you over. Often my deaths would be a result of not paying attention to which directions the cards in my hand can move me. So I'd find myself only with cards that move up or down, but not left or right, which I needed to escape harm. Of course, there are other ways to avoid damage, such as reducing the opponent's attack strength with break cards, or countering with action cards. It's up to you to figure out which approach is best given the situation. The crucial decision making is not limited to the battles either, but while you are out traversing the dungeons as well. Because this is a roguelite, your deck gets reset back to the basic starter deck at the start of each run. So you will have to collect new cards by defeating enemy mods and muses, or opening treasure data. There are even in-battle treasures like Battle Network's battle mystery data. You may also set wild cards from your stock, within limitations, that can be used once per dungeon when you need it. Later on in the full game, there will be grand battle dungeons and even an online PvP mode that allows you to build a deck from your stock of cards you have collected throughout your playtime. Basically just like your chip pack from Battle Network. However, neither of these modes are available to try in the demo, which also means the demo doesn't get far enough to where we meet the villain character Nanoct. Basically confirming my theory that the story trailer that Inti released doesn't occur until the mid-game at the earliest. Anyway, when you win a battle or collect a treasure, you are presented with 3 cards to choose from, and this is where you want to choose cards wisely that align with your deck strategy or have strong effects in general. If you don't like the selection, there are limited rerolls available as you power up Neon. More on that later. Also, if you fight an enemy that is adjacent to an enemy muse, boss, or other foes, their level will increase, which makes them bigger damage sponges and increases their strength too. Winning those harder battles grants a random boost to the drop card's rarity, from common to rare to ultra rare and so on. Oh, and the chance to add cheat codes to the cards too. So there is a reward to risking the tougher fights. Just be sure you come prepared since permadeath is in play for any difficulty over easy mode. Thankfully, the game does allow you to flee any fights that look dire, including boss encounters. Oh yeah, sometimes after a battle, a board game-esque event can occur with a character asking a question, and depending on your choice, you can receive extra cards this way, or have to give up a card for potentially a greater return. Now each dungeon so far at least has 3 floors to them. At the end of each floor is a boss to defeat in order to progress. You might be thinking, so I can just run past all the enemies and skip right to the boss? Well, you might want to grind some better cards first, but yes, it's technically possible. However, there is a mechanic in place to punish you for skipping too many fights. Every time you move to a new enemy controlled square, your memory gauge fills up and increases the chances of triggering a trap. Traps cause a negative effect like starting battle with less cost points, less cards in hand, or discarding extra cards each move. The only way to remove traps is by subjugating the square, or in other words, clearing the enemies out. Once a square is subjugated, you are presented with 3 options: recovery, enhance, and position. Recovery is actually the only way to recover your HP, unless you find a lucky heal in a treasure data somewhere. But perhaps more importantly, recovery lowers your memory gauge more than it naturally lowers after battle, so you do run a risk if you don't recover periodically. Enhance allows you to apply a cheat code, aka an additional buff or effect, to one of the 3 random cards from your deck. And any cheat codes apply to all copies of that card in your deck. Kind of like the star cards in Mega Man Star Force 2. Very good stuff. And this is also how you get cards looking like a modern Yu-Gi-Oh card just because of how many effects are on it. Lastly, you may choose to position one of your cards or muses in the square for a buff or instant muse activation for battles in the adjacent squares. I like to do this for squares connecting to the boss or an enemy muse for an immediate advantage in those battles. All 3 options are useful depending on the situation, but choose wisely. One more thing. The second dungeon in the demo introduces a super boss that spawns on the last floor. Defeating it raises your score, so it's a good opportunity for high score runs, but only if you have a competent deck, because the super boss is going to have an insane amount of HP and will take a ton of break damage before staggering, not to mention they hit like a truck, so it can be a run killer too if you're not careful. It is certainly doable though, as I can attest. Once the dungeon is cleared, your rank is determined mostly by the amount of turns taken throughout the entire run, and 3 stars, or whatever it is, appears to be the highest. Regardless of your performance, or even if you die though, Neon will gain experience points and earn decode tokens, both from the result and level ups. How do I know what happens when you die? Not gonna lie, Chief, my win-loss ratio hasn't been great. On normal difficulty, it took 2 or 3 attempts to clear each of the story dungeons my first time. Yeah, it was a bit surprising how difficult it gets, particularly by the last floor. I definitely had my fair share of close calls too. Skill issue? Maybe, and perhaps you'll have an easier time if you play more conservatively than I did. I'm just relaying my personal experience here, but it was exciting when I pulled off a victory by the skin of my teeth. Anyway, you can spend your decode tokens when you return to base through its enhance menu. Crack the gacha, and you can select from 3 random powers from each tier's pool, until you obtain them all, ranging from increasing the chances for rare card drops, treasure chests, more rerolls per dungeon, increasing wild card slots, and raising Neon's max HP. More tiers of these crypto data, as it were, are unlocked as you go that cost more decode tokens per use. In true roguelite fashion, this is the other way you progress your character in between runs, aside from building up your card stock. That covers the gameplay loop. All that's left is to try the tons of difficulty modes that unlock after each successful run. Hard mode means not only higher stats for enemies, but the introduction of new skills for bosses and special rules. For example, Hard +3 made it so that after I play the first card each turn, the leftmost card in my hand is discarded, but then, equal to its cost, that number of 0 cost rush cards is forged to my hand. It changes up how you approach the battles just enough to keep you on your toes. Man, there's still a lot I never mentioned too, like how enemy muses themselves buff enemies and squares adjacent to them, causing negative special rules for you, or how some enemies can summon their own objects, or force virus, freeze, and error cards to your hand that disrupt your playstyle. Unless, perhaps you can find a way to use those to your advantage too? Overall, slowing down Battle Network into a turn-based card game might seem really boring at first. What's the point, right? But when I embraced Card-en-Ciel on its own terms, and approached it like a TCG, I have been enjoying balancing the various risk and reward systems, and how the game makes me think really hard and plan ahead. Let me tell ya, it sure gives my brain a workout. Card-en-Ciel, without a doubt, is funner than Mega Man Battle Chip Challenge. Though, let's be real for a second, that's not hard to manage. The true question is, can Card-en-Ciel stand up to mainline Battle Network? Well, of course not, silly! Battle Network is still the king in my eyes, and I doubt my opinion is going to change on that with the full release. Not that it's a fair comparison to make in the first place. They're both completely different games. That said, out of these spiritual successor games that are out there, I think so far, Card-en-Ciel stands out as one of the more interesting takes on the genre that I have played. Oh yeah, and in terms of if you're going to get your money's worth with this game, I will say that I've spent anywhere from 20 to 40, maybe even an hour inside of each dungeon, each run. I'm pretty sure by the time I'm done with the full game, I'm gonna have countless hours invested into this game. There's a ton of replayability here with the several dungeons and difficulty modes available. So yeah, for 25 bucks, I have a good feeling that you might get your money's worth, at least time investment wise. The final judgment, of course, is gonna come with the full review. I do have a couple of gripes on the aside. I also wish that the visual effects from attacks landing or defeating enemies had more oomph to them. I don't feel the impact of my hits that well, probably because there's no flinching animation like in Battle Network. My biggest con, however, is that from the demo and all the trailers seen so far, literally every dungeon looks exactly the same visually. There is no variety whatsoever. So the main visual difference comes down to backgrounds changing based on the muse nearby or the characters that you fight, which barely helps considering that you have characters from all sorts of different games colliding together. It makes it funny when in the story Neon is like, "Oh, this must be X game, I know this well." Wow, Neon, I'm glad you noticed because the dungeon looks the same as the last game we entered. I guess Inti knows that they're going to be compared to Battle Network anyway, so they fully committed to the bit and made Battle Network 1 looking maps. Hopefully that means that if they ever produce a sequel, we get visual variety in the maps and Card-en-Ciel 2 plays like the second coming of Christ compared to the first game. In the present though, I gotta say I look forward to playing more, testing the modes the demo skipped out on, and reporting back to you with my complete thoughts come October 24th. While we wait, you can play the demo I talked about today yourself starting September 4th through the game's Steam page that I will link in the description. Don't forget that the demo is coming to Nintendo Switch as well on September 5th. I want to thank all of you so much for watching, especially if you stayed through the whole thing. I appreciate ya. If you liked my coverage, stay tuned to ShadowRockZX for more on Inti creates, Card-en-Ciel, including when I stream the demo and post the final review, and of course, all things Mega Man. Until next time, rock on and have a wonderful time zone.